to the first episode of the What Hustle channel, where we ride, we hustle, we repeat. What's going on, What family? Welcome back to episode 3 of the What Hustle live stream, where we ride, we hustle, we repeat, my beautiful people. Let me see if I can set this up. Okay, here it goes. I should be able to read these. Let me see if I can do this. I'm using StreamYard to do the broadcast. I'm not directly on YouTube, so it kind of functions a little different. And whereas like in the Premiere, I can answer questions right off. 1 second, let me see if I can figure this out. I can answer questions right out of the platform, but here I'm going to have Lorena give me the question, and she may have to answer for me unless I can figure this out in 2 seconds. Just give me a quick minute to try to get on here. Okay, no, I should be able to do it from right here and answer. All right. Okay, so there's Wanda. Oh, you know what? I gotta do the volume of it. Let me delete the volume here. Okay, I should be able to do it now. Let me see who else is on here. Miami in the house. Valentina. Very nice, very nice, very nice. All right, so here's what I want to do with today's show. I'm going to first go over some of the latest news. One is I found extremely interesting, because for those that are in this niche, if you're not aware, recently or not too long ago, Scott Hardesty had a beef with APAS because of their misleading claims on their batteries. Well, here's what's interesting, my beautiful people. Amazon and UL, which is the company that certifies batteries, are suing APAS for lying, basically. So here is what came out in the news. Amazon and UL are suing 5 e-bike and e-scooter companies, alleging that they are improperly labeling their products with the UL trademark. Now, this is one of the things that in Scott's video, his contention with them was that they were misleading the consumer. Number one, they're not UL certified. And number two, what they said the battery wattage was, or volts were, I'm sorry, were not accurate. And although this lawsuit is for 5 companies, the major one is APAS. The other ones I'm not really too familiar with them, what bikes they actually produce, but I'll read to you actually, I won't try to read because most of it is in Chinese, but here are some of the companies. Let me see if I can figure it out for you guys. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'll put it in the show notes if you're interested in the 5 companies. But basically, the one that I'm familiar with and the most well-known one is APAS, which, man, they're having a lot of issues. All right, Orlando's in the house. So that was one interesting thing that came out of the news. Let's see what else is on here that I want to talk about. Oh, if you're not aware, Rad Power Bikes had filed for bankruptcy. Rad Power Bikes used to be $1 billion company, and Life Electric Vehicles acquired them for $13.2 million. And this came out on January, just January 27. But so the company that acquired them, I'm very familiar with them because they're here locally. They're in Deerfield Beach, Florida, and it's Life EV agreed to acquire Rad Power Bikes assets. That's key for $13.276 million in cash, and after accounting for liabilities, the total purchase was $14 million from Rad Power Bikes. So. And on a positive note, at least Rad Power Bikes is still going to be in existence, but now they're owned by Life Electric Vehicles. And again, proud to say that they're a local company here in Deerfield Beach. That's not too far from where I live. Super excited about that. Let's see what else is in the news. Now, guys, if you guys have any questions, any comments, list them below. Again, say hi. Tell me where you're watching from. All over the news is all the new e-bike laws. I'm not going to rehash that. Discuss these e-bike laws during last live stream with Bob. But one thing I do want to note: there's a lot of people out there talking about e-bike laws, and they're mentioning Florida in specific. Two things you need to separate. You need to separate what a proposed bill is, what's being considered, and what actually passes, right? So, for example, in Florida, there was a crazy bill that was put out by some stupid representative out of Pinellas County, I believe, definitely out of the west coast of Florida, right? Let me just say that, out of the west coast of Florida, out of the left side of Florida when you're facing Florida, right? This representative put out this crazy bill on e-bike laws. Well, it got super watered down, and right now the only major change in the law is that it requires that FHP, the Florida Highway Patrol or Department of Transportation, do additional studies on or keep and track data on e-bike crashes. So those that are saying that these laws have passed, etc., they haven't passed. And in fact, they haven't passed in many places. I think Iowa had a huge win in their bill that was proposed that got knocked down as well. So unless you're in Jersey, because that's the only crazy place that I'm aware of, in New Hampshire, I don't know if their bill passed yet. And their bill was simply registering e-bikes. There was nothing super crazy there. But unless you're in Jersey, because Jersey passed the most ridiculous, crazy law I've ever heard, and hopefully it gets overturned. But unless you're in Jersey, I wouldn't stress about it that much. But I will say this. I've said this before. I'm going to continue to say it. You need to be an advocate. You need to know what's going on, what's being proposed, and you need to constantly be writing your local representative. I mentioned during last week's live stream that I actually had dinner with my representative and actually talked to him about and educated him on the difference between an e-bike and an e-moto, because they're actually lumping both into one. And I, for one, don't want that to happen, because an e-bike is definitely not an e-moto, and an e-moto is not an e-bike, right? So make sure you're educating your people. And on a side note, and I'm going to give credit to the Hazer channel, I just saw an interesting video that they put out with the Suran guy. I forget whatever his name is. That he went to Australia, did some kind of stunt, and man, did that created some backlash down there. And it's the worst place to do it, right? Because Australia is probably close to Jersey, California, and some of these other nanny states, but that's a country, super nanny country. So, I mean, I would have never pulled out attempted to do a stunt like that there, because that's the last place I would have done it. Anyways, it's creating a lot of backlash. And again, if you listen to the news articles and the news that reported it, They didn't say it was an e-moto. They said it was an e-bike. Again, we don't want to be lumped into that. Now, speaking about rad, I want to touch, because the main focus on this live stream is to talk about some disappointments as it relates to e-bikes. So if you have an e-bike and you've been disappointed by the e-bike, put it in the comment below. Let me know which e-bike disappointed you the most. I'm going to talk about 3 e-bikes in specific. Maybe depending on time, I may add another one on bikes that I have written and tested that never even made it to my channel. That's how bad they were, right? The first one, and let me see if I can share my screen. First of all, I got to find it. Where did I put it at? I think it was in my email. Can I do this? Can I do this? Can I do this? There it is. All right. I don't know if anybody's familiar with this e-bike here, but this is the Revo hubless e-bike. Boy, what a, I mean, let me not trash it. Let me not say that. Let me just say this. This e-bike, for me, it was so bad from a safety standpoint that I didn't even post the video. I mean, my question to you guys is the following, right? This e-bike came out with some, supposedly the design, you know, it's how do I say it? They prioritize the design more than they prioritize safety. And let me put it that way, right? I had some serious issues with the braking on this bike. Again, to the point that I felt that I didn't want to put this out because it truly was a safety issue. The braking was really, really bad on this bike. And unfortunate, because I think it's a unique bike. It's the design is definitely unique. There was a lot of hype to this bike, but definitely not worth even, like I said, not even putting it out. So this is my number one bike that I tested it, hugely disappointed in this particular bike. But there's more. We're going to talk about a couple more. So the next one I want to talk about, let me see if I can bring it up. Now this one, it's not so, I mean, let me see if it came up. Yeah. So this bike here, and I'm not even going to pretend to know what it is called, but it's a muff. I think it's what they called this bike here. But it was so bad that it got recalled, right? And let me see if I can bring this up. Give me one quick second. Boom, 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 boom. So yeah, so again, and this goes back to the same thing with that first bike. It had serious braking issues, and that's why the manufacturer recalled this bike. I mean, they recalled thousands of this bike back on the recall. Again, another bike that I rode, did not ride good, wasn't comfortable. I'm a pedal guy, so let me preface it by saying this. I'm a pedal guy. I'm not a throttle guy. So not comfortable, battery was weak, and huge safety issues with the throttle. Next bike that I want to talk about, and we just talked about rad, is some of the rad power bikes. In fact, there's a couple of news articles, you can even see it, how a lot of the rad bikes, the batteries were bad and caught fire in some of the areas. And then the big problem, and again, this is probably one of the reasons why they went bankrupt, is because there was so many complaints by the consumer about the lack of serviceability, about the lack of parts, about the lack of customer service with rad power bikes. So there was a big issue in terms of these bikes lasting. They were breaking down constantly, and I can tell you, I when I rode them, I didn't think they were super. I didn't see much negative in terms of initial impression with the bike. They didn't ride bad. At least the bikes that I rode. But the question you have to ask yourself is, and I've mentioned this on my budget e-bikes that I've been riding lately, is when you ride a bike initially, and this is one of the reasons why I sometimes take what reviewers say with a grain of salt, because most reviewers only have the bike for a very short period of time. So yeah, they'll give you the specs. Yeah, they'll tell you how it rides in that particular moment. But as an owner, I want to know how it's going to ride, after me putting 5,000 miles on the bike. It's going to be even riding after 5,000 miles. And that's my big question marks with these budget e-bikes that I'm currently riding, like the Victrip R6, the F6, the YR20. How long are these bikes going to last? So there's a big question mark there. And this is and I always mention it in my videos. And this is why I also do multiple videos of the same bike, because I want you to see how the bike is doing, not just after the first initial review. And that's the issue with rad power bikes, and is their longevity. Most of them were breaking down. You couldn't get parts, and worse, you couldn't get customer service for those parts. And those are the ones that I want to specifically talk about in terms of huge disappointment. And then the last one, actually, I'm going to talk about two, right? Two more. I know these two are somewhat controversial, and I know one in particular I've already had a lot of hate for because I talked about it. And if you know or if you follow this channel for a long time, probably know which bike I'm going to talk about. And it's not that it's a bad bike. I'm going to repeat that before I say the name. The bike itself is a good bike, but it was a huge disappointment for me because everyone was saying, they talk about how phenomenal this bike is. And I have to believe that the reason they're saying this bike is so good is because they really haven't tested what a good bike is, or they haven't been on what a good bike is. And that is the Felodo Falcon, but the step through, right? Not the step over. The step over is actually, I think it's better than the step through. A little bit better, not that much better, but a little bit better, a little bit more start strength. I mean, and I just said what the biggest pet peeve with that bike is for me. That start strength is so bad that I think it's a safety issue if you're trying to cross a major street, unless you're walking the bike, right? If you're trying to cross a street where there is no traffic light, but there's heavy traffic, good luck, because that start strength is really, really bad. So the Felodo Falcon was a huge disappointment for me. And then the next one, and this one may also cause some people to say that I'm crazy, is the Red One Up. The Ride One Up. I'm sorry, the Ride One Up. And it's going to be the same thing that I say about the rad bikes, right? Customer service really kind of sucks. The battery or the range on it sucks. I mean, it was the brands. They overestimate the infrastructure needed to support these rapid sales for these bikes. So and in this case, I think they definitely did, right? It's a very popular bike, but because it's popular and because and if you're not aware, most of these companies have a very small staff. I talk about Goat Power Bikes. one of my favorite companies, one of my favorite bikes. When I started to become very familiar with them internally, right, I quickly realized that, man, they're very small. There's this, like, for example, the person, Brian, who runs their social media and their marketing, he's a contract worker. He's not even an actual Go Power Bike employee. He's contracted by them. There's only a handful of employees with that company. Another one that's this company produces a lot of bikes, and they have a big category of bikes. It's the Fabulous / Furious bikes. Great bikes, right? But man, it's tough to get support because they're just overwhelmed because they're so popular. So anyway, that's my spill. Let me see if there's any questions. Let me stop sharing my screen. Okay, first question here. We're seeing an explosive growth in e-bike industry, but also more scrutiny, 100%, a lot more scrutiny. From your perspective, are we entering the phase where safety and reliability matters more than height? Hell the F yes. Great question. But I just talked about 3 bikes, right? Or 4, I can't remember now how many I talked about. All of them were related to safety and reliability of the bike and or the company itself in terms of customer service. I rave about Go Power Bikes because they're even though, again, operation-wise, staff-wise, it's small, but man, do they really back their products. I'm going to name companies that I know a lot of you guys hate because they do have issues with quality control, but they back them up. Anioki. Anioki is by far, and not because, I became a fan of them, not only because I reviewed their bikes, but then I became an owner of their bikes. Then I became a distributor of their bikes because I'm a firm believer that the bike is a phenomenal bike for what I do and for what I need, right? I need a bike that's going to replace my car. Anioki bikes can literally replace my car, right? Go Power Bikes can replace my car, right? They have speed, they have range, they're durable, all that stuff. Now, Anioki, again, they, especially with their AQ 177, had a lot of quality control issues with that bike. But they since corrected that, right? And I can tell you, even though I personally haven't had any personal issues with their bikes, I can tell you that I've had friends who own the bike that had, and Anioki responded immediately. Another person that never really kind of talked bad about, because you don't have to take my word for it. And I mention this guy all the time because I'm a big fan of his. It's Scott Hardesty, right? Scott had a big issue with Anioki. In fact, such a big issue with Anioki that he won't review their bikes anymore. But one thing he can't say is that Anioki did not respond to him. Anioki responded to him, provided him the necessary parts and or instructions on how to fix the issues. They were very responsive, and that's what you need. And I've said this before. I'm going to say it again. No bike is perfect. No company is perfect. All I ask from a company is that if there's an issue, that I can get a hold of somebody and that they respond. That's it. Help me fix the problem. And that's all I can ask for, because this issue is not only isolated to e-bikes. Cars are the same way. I mean, look at GM, look at Ford, Toyota, Honda. They've all had quality control issues. They all had vehicle recalls. No company is perfect. No item is perfect. You're going to have issues with them. And this is why if I ever get a bike that has an issue with the bike, as long as the company is responsive and helps me fix the issue, I'm okay with that. All right. Let me see if there's another question. What responsibility do content creators like myself have when reviewing bikes that they may look revolutionary, but will have real world safety application? I just talked about, right? I just talked about the Javi, whatever it's called, bike. it was so bad, and I was so concerned for people's safety that I didn't even post a video on it. It's because we do have a responsibility. People do listen to us, and if there's a safety issue, it has to be addressed. I talked about the wired bikes, specifically the Scout, the Warrior, the Predator, and now the upcoming Viper. I don't think that bike is for everyone. In fact, I think if you are a beginner with e-bikes and you get that bike, do not unlock it. If you unlock it, that's where the issues are. I don't think that bike is safe unlocked in the wrong hands. I think it's a safety issue. I talked about myself. I have a lot of experience riding. Lots of experience riding. I average about 50 miles a day on a bike, right? And I crashed on that bike. So if I will, and I've always said this in terms of whether it's a pedal bike, an e-bike, even a motorcycle, it's not if you're going to crash, it's a matter of when. We all crashed, right? I've crashed on my motorcycle, I crashed on my pedal bike, and I've crashed on my e-bike. You're going to crash. And when you have a high-powered e-bike like a wired bike, it becomes a safety issue in the wrong hands. And that bike is well made. That bike has phenomenal brakes. Quality control on that bike is fairly good. Not perfect, but it's fairly good. And I will entrust that bike with anyone until we're talking about unlocking it, right? My boy's on South Jersey Dashing. I know he's out there making money right now. I wanted him to be on this live call, but like I said, he's out there hustling. He's riding, hustling, he's repeating. I like that. Thank you for hopping on. Next question. Do you think today's buyers are informed enough to separate marketing from engineering? Hell no. I wish that was the case. I really wish that was the case. I'm going to include myself in this category. I myself am not well versed in engineering to know enough to know whether a hub drive motor is good or not. When I review the bikes and the manufacturer claims it peaks at, let's say 3,000 watts, I tell you guys all the time, I have no way of knowing that, right? I don't have a way of testing that. So there's guys out there that do a phenomenal job. I'm gonna give some shout out to a couple of people. Area 13, they do a phenomenal job of testing out wattages, and educating the public. Alex from Maximum Charge, he does a phenomenal job with the batteries, telling you if what they're claiming is actually real. I'm not that well versed in those aspects, right? The controller, I'm learning. I have done mods. For example, when I upgraded my Aoki AQ177 to a 5,000 watt motor, I could have attempted to do that myself, but I elected to go with Tommy E-Bike, aka E-Bike Guy. He has more knowledge than I am, more well versed than I am in mods. So I took the bike to him. So the average consumer, my battery's gonna die on my thing. Give me one quick second. My camera was gonna die. I forgot to charge it. Well, I didn't forget to charge it. I did 2 live shows today, one for my other channel and then this one. But anyways, to answer that question, no, I think the average consumer needs to do a better job of educating him or herself. This is why I think these channels do well, because they rely on us to provide them the information they need to be at least a little bit versed as to what they're looking for when they buy. But as I said earlier on, take what we say with a grain of salt, especially for long-term use of these bikes, because most of us don't ride these bikes long enough to give you a true sense of the quality of the bike, right? All right. See if there's any other questions. I don't see any other question. Anyway, my beautiful people, appreciate you guys hanging on. Appreciate the questions. Don't forget, guys, ride, hustle, repeat. Love you guys.